Margaret Hayes had carried the same house key for more than 20 years. It had a little scratch near the top, the kind you get from dropping it on the driveway one too many times. She never thought much about it, until that Thursday afternoon. The grocery bag on her arm was heavier than it should have been. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, a bunch of green grapes, and a still warm rotisserie chicken that smelled like dinner. She climbed the porch steps, humming without realizing it, and slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. She frowned, pulled it out, tried again, slower this time. Nothing. She flipped it over, like maybe she'd lost her mind for a second. Still nothing. That was when she noticed the quiet. No TV, no music from the kitchen, not even the hum of the old ceiling fan she always left on. She tried the key one more time, and just as she started to jiggle it, she heard the click of a lock turning from the inside. The door opened just a crack. Daniel stood there, her son, not by blood, but by every other measure that mattered. Beside him was Harper, his fiancée, arms crossed and eyes darting like she wanted to be anywhere else. Margaret's first thought was that something was wrong. Did I forget to lock it this morning?" she asked, half laughing to hide the knot in her stomach. Daniel didn't smile. "Margaret, you don't live here anymore." The words landed harder than a slammed door. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "What are you talking about? This is my—" "You signed the papers," Harper cut in, her voice too casual, like they were talking about returning a library book. "The house is ours now. We just thought it'd be easier to make the change today." Margaret's hand tightened around the grocery bag until the bread inside bent. She looked at Daniel, searching for some kind of joke, some kind of crack in his expression that would tell her this wasn't real. But his face stayed hard. In that moment, standing on the porch with dinner cooling in her arms, she felt something shift deep inside. It wasn't just about a lock or a door. This, whatever it was about to change everything. Long before locks were changed and words cut sharper than any blade, there was another Thursday, a different porch, a different door. Margaret was 34 then, still teaching second grade in a little elementary school on the edge of town. She'd made peace with the idea that she might never have children. Life had given her a few hard truths, 2 miscarriages, a divorce that ended with silence instead of shouting, and a quiet apartment filled with books and empty picture frames. That day, she'd stopped by the county children's home after school. She wasn't there for anything official, just dropping off boxes of donated coats her students' parents had gathered. In the common room, she noticed a boy sitting alone at a table. Thin arms, knees pulled up under his chin, wearing a t-shirt that looked 2 sizes too big. He didn't look up when people walked by. One of the staff whispered, "That's Daniel, 4 years old. Came in last week from a bad foster placement, doesn't talk much." Margaret should have left it at that. She had papers to grade, dinner to cook. But something about the way he held himself, small, guarded, like the world had already taken too much, made her stop. She walked over, set a juice box on the table and said, "Mind if I sit here?" No answer. Just a quick glance at her hand as it rested near his. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, he reached for the juice, poked the straw in and took a sip. "Thanks," he murmured so soft she almost missed it. 2 weeks later, she was visiting every other day, reading to him, playing checkers, teaching him to tie his shoes with a pair of old sneakers she brought from home. He started calling her Miss Margaret, then just Margaret. One afternoon when she stood up to leave, he wrapped his little arms around her waist and said, "Can you stay?" It wasn't a lightning strike or a dramatic movie moment. It was quiet, simple. The kind of request that slides into your heart and stays there. By spring, she had filed the first set of adoption papers. 6 months later, Daniel's last name matched hers. Friends told her she was crazy, taking on a child alone, with no husband, no backup. But Margaret would just smile and say, "Some things you don't do because they're easy. You do them because they're right." She had no way of knowing then how much joy and heartbreak would grow from that one choice. For a long time, life with Daniel felt like building something steady, brick by brick. Margaret threw herself into motherhood the way she had once thrown herself into her classroom, full heart, no shortcuts. They moved into the little blue house on Maple Street, the one with the wide porch and the rosebush that bloomed late every summer. She painted his room bright green because he said it reminded him of the park. She bought him a race car bed and covered the walls with posters of planets and baseball players. Saturdays were for pancakes and the farmer's market. Sundays were for the library, where they'd leave with stacks so high Daniel had to carry them against his chest. Margaret signed him up for swimming lessons when she found out he was scared of water. She sat through piano recitals where every note wobbled, but her applause never did. When he wheezed from asthma, she'd sit by his bed all night, one hand on his back, counting breaths until morning. For years it was just them against the world, and then middle school happened. Daniel started pulling away, first in small ways, closing his bedroom door more often, answering questions with a shrug, then bigger ways, avoiding weekend plans, disappearing to friends' houses without calling. One afternoon at the grocery store, she caught him staring at a family in the next aisle. A blonde man, a blonde woman, and a boy who looked like a smaller version of both. "Why do I look different from you?" he asked suddenly, his voice flat. She didn't flinch. "Because you came from someone else, but that doesn't mean you're not mine." He nodded, but she could see it didn't land. By high school, the distance had turned into a gulf. He still came home, still ate her cooking when he was around, but there was a restlessness in him, a need to be somewhere else. She'd watch him from the porch as he walked to his car, phone already in hand, and wonder when her little boy had turned into a young man she could barely read. She never pushed. She figured love, even quiet love, would be enough to keep them tethered. What she didn't know then was that sometimes love alone can't stop the drift. And once it starts, you can't always see where it's headed until it's too late. It had been almost 5 years since Daniel moved out for good. Margaret got used to the quiet in ways she never thought she would. She kept his room exactly the same. Green walls, race car bed, even the old posters curling at the corners. She told herself it was just in case he wanted to come home, though deep down she wasn't sure if he ever would. Then one chilly autumn afternoon he did. Margaret was on the porch trimming the rosebush when she heard the crunch of tyres on the gravel driveway. Daniel stepped out of a silver sedan, taller than she remembered, wearing a fitted button-down like he'd just come from a meeting. Beside him was Harper, a tall, polished young woman with dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail and the kind of smile that didn't linger in the eyes. "Hey, Margaret," Daniel said, using her first name. It startled her. He'd never done that before, but she let it slide. They came inside, and before she knew it, Harper was helping in the kitchen, asking about recipes, while Daniel fixed the wobbly leg on the coffee table. The next week, he showed up again to clean the gutters. The week after, he mowed the lawn. Margaret's chest warmed with a hope she hadn't let herself feel in years. Maybe he missed home. Maybe they were finding their way back to each other. They sat on the porch one evening, Harper sipping iced tea while Daniel leaned back in the old rocking chair. The air smelled like baked cornbread cooling inside. Out of nowhere, Harper asked, "So, do you still have all the paperwork for the house? You know, deeds, taxes, that kind of thing?" Margaret blinked. "Somewhere in the desk drawer, I think. Why?" "Oh, just curious," Harper said lightly, taking another sip before changing the subject to a show they'd been watching. It was such a small moment, so easily brushed aside, that Margaret didn't think much of it. She just kept cooking, cleaning, and enjoying the company, happy to believe her son was back for the right reasons. She didn't realise then that sometimes people come back into your life not to rebuild what was lost, but to take what's left. It was a rainy Sunday, the kind of day that made the house feel smaller and warmer at the same time. Margaret had a pot of vegetable soup simmering on the stove, the smell of thyme and carrots filling the kitchen. She was folding laundry at the table when Daniel and Harper walked in without knocking. "Got something for you to sign," Daniel said, shaking water off his jacket. Margaret looked up, half smiling. "What is it?" "Nothing serious. Just some tax forms, a couple things about the house, cleaning up the paperwork so it's easier if something happens down the road," he said, pulling a folder from his bag like it was no big deal. Harper set her purse on a chair and added, "It's standard stuff. My uncle works in real estate. He says this kind of thing helps avoid a mess later." Margaret hesitated. She wasn't a fan of legal jargon, and she hated wearing her reading glasses. They pinched the sides of her nose. "Do I need to have someone look at it first?" she asked. Daniel shook his head, grinning in that boyish way she remembered from when he wanted something. Nah, it's all straightforward. I even highlighted where you need to sign so you don't have to wade through the boring parts. She wanted to believe him. This was her boy, the one she'd read bedtime stories to, the one she'd taught to ride a bike, the one who used to slip his small hand into hers when they crossed the street. So she signed, page after page. The pen felt heavier with each stroke, but she pushed the thought aside. Daniel slid the papers back into the folder, thanked her, and moved on to talking about a new restaurant he and Harper wanted to try. The rain drummed against the windows. The soup bubbled softly on the stove. And somewhere in that ordinary afternoon, something irreversible had happened. She didn't know it yet, but those signatures had shifted the ground beneath her feet. One day, they would be used to push her out of the only home she'd ever truly made. Margaret didn't remember driving away. One minute she was standing on the porch with that grocery bag in her arms. The next she was a few blocks down, parked under a streetlight that flickered every few seconds. She sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2 like she was still in motion. The chicken in the passenger seat had gone cold, the skin turning soft inside the plastic. The grapes had rolled out of the bag and were scattered on the floor mat by her feet. It was early evening, but the November sky was already dark. She could see the faint glow of her house down the road, the house she'd painted, decorated, filled with laughter and quiet moments alike. Now it wasn't hers, at least not in any way that mattered to the law. Margaret didn't cry. She thought maybe she should, but no tears came. Instead, there was this heavy stillness, the kind that made every sound feel louder, the tick of the cooling engine, the distant bark of a dog, the shuffle of leaves against the curb. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn notebook. The cover was soft from years of being handled, pages bent and smudged at the corners. It was where she wrote everything down, phone numbers, recipes, little reminders to herself. Near the back, in handwriting smaller and neater than usual, was something most people in her life didn't know existed. Bank account details, dates, balances. Margaret had never told Daniel about the inheritance from her late uncle in California, a man she'd cared for in his final months, who left her a sum she'd tucked away in quiet investments. Over the years, it had grown into more than she ever imagined. Enough to start over, enough to fight back if she had to. But in that moment, it wasn't about money. It was about the hollow ache in her chest, the feeling of having given someone your whole heart only to have them hand it back in pieces. She leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes. The motel on the other side of town would take cash, no questions asked. It wasn't home, but it would have a door she could lock from the inside. And right now, that was more than she had. The motel was the kind of place you didn't look at too closely. Beige curtains that never quite closed all the way. A heater that rattled like it was coughing. A faint smell of bleach mixed with something older you couldn't name. But it was warm, and the lock on the door worked. That was enough for one night. Margaret set her grocery bag on the small table by the window and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged under her weight. She pulled her notebook from her purse again, turning it over in her hands like it was a lifeline. It wasn't just a notebook, it was the only place she kept the truth. 14 years earlier, her Uncle James had left her everything he had when he passed. A modest house in California and a portfolio of investments she barely understood at the time. She sold the house, kept the investments, and never spoke a word about it to anyone. Not her friends, not her neighbours, not even Daniel. Over time, the numbers in those accounts grew into something she could never have earned from teaching alone. It was enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Enough to help people if she wanted to. Enough to walk away from anyone who thought they could take everything from her. She had kept it a secret because money changes people. She didn't want Daniel looking at her like a bank instead of a mother. She thought protecting that secret was a way of protecting their relationship. Now, sitting in a motel room with peeling wallpaper and a rotisserie chicken she no longer wanted to eat, she realised it had protected her in another way. It meant she wasn't powerless. Margaret reached for her flip phone and scrolled through the contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in years, Frank Miller. He'd been her neighbour back when Daniel was still a boy. Retired now, but he'd once worked at the county clerk's office and knew more about property records than most lawyers. She stared at his name for a long moment before pressing call. When he answered, his voice was warm but surprised. "Margaret, been a long time." "It has," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Frank, I think I need some help." Frank insisted they meet in person. "Some things you don't talk about over the phone," he said, and told her to come by the diner on Main Street the next morning. Margaret got there early. She slid into a booth by the window, the kind with red vinyl seats and a little crack in the corner. Outside, the town was still waking up, shopkeepers turning signs to open, kids with backpacks waiting for the bus. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug the waitress set down, letting the heat settle into her fingers. Frank walked in a few minutes later, heavier in the middle than she remembered, hair greyer but with the same sharp eyes. He slid into the booth across from her and got right to it. "Tell me what happened." So she did. From the folder Daniel brought over, to the highlighted signature lines, to finding herself locked out of her own house. Frank didn't interrupt, just listened, tapping his finger on the side of his coffee mug. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. "Sounds to me like they got you to sign a quitclaim deed. That means you basically handed over the property, but..." He leaned in. "If you signed it under false pretenses, if they misrepresented what it was, there's a good chance you can fight it." Margaret nodded slowly. "I'm not looking to drag him through the mud, Frank. I just want my home back. And to look at myself in the mirror without feeling like a fool." Frank's mouth twitched into a half smile. "Then we'll make it about the truth. No screaming matches, no ugly headlines, just facts. I've got a friend, young lawyer, sharp as they come. She'll know what to do." They spent the next hour going over what Margaret remembered. Dates, conversations, anything Harper had said, anything Daniel had promised. Margaret had written much of it down already, old habits from years of teaching and keeping careful records. When they stood to leave, Frank put a hand on her shoulder. "You've got more power here than you think, and I don't mean just the money." Margaret almost told him about the inheritance right then, but stopped herself. That was still hers to keep, for now. As she walked out into the crisp morning air, she realised something had shifted. Yesterday she'd felt like someone who had lost everything. Today, for the first time, she felt like someone about to start fighting. Margaret didn't call ahead. She knew if she did, Daniel would find an excuse not to see her, or worse, send Harper to answer the door. It was late afternoon when she pulled into the driveway. The house looked neat, almost staged. The hedges were clipped in sharp lines, the porch swept clean. But it didn't feel like her home anymore. The rose bush she'd tended for years was gone. Daniel opened the door wearing a hoodie and gym shorts, holding a shaker cup. His face shifted the second he saw her. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" "I need 5 minutes," she said, stepping just close enough that the screen door was the only thing between them. He hesitated, then stepped outside, letting the door fall shut behind him. "If this is about the house..." "It is," she cut in, her voice steady. "And before you say anything, I'm not here to yell or beg. I just want you to hear me." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I raised you when nobody else would. Not because I had to, and not because it was easy, but because I wanted to. I gave you every ounce of what I had, time, sleep, vacations, pieces of myself I'll never get back. And I never once made you feel like a guest in this life." He shifted his weight, eyes flicking toward the street. "You signed the papers, Margaret. I didn't force you." She nodded once. "You're right, I signed. Because I trusted you. And you used that trust to take something that wasn't yours to take." For the first time, his gaze dropped. "I'm not broke," she continued. "Never have been. I could buy this house 10 times over if I wanted to. But that's not the point. Love isn't a business deal. Loyalty can't be bought. And now I know, and so do you, that what we had wasn't as solid as I thought." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," she said. "This will go where it needs to go. I just wanted to look you in the eye before it does." They stood there in the cooling light, neither moving. Then Margaret stepped back, turned toward her car, and walked away without another word. She didn't slam the door on their history, but she did close it on the part of her life where she mistook silence for peace. The court process was slower than she wanted, but faster than she expected. Frank's lawyer friend filed the paperwork, gathered her notes, and laid out the case. It turned out the judge didn't need much convincing. Those signature lines Daniel had slid across the table came with a trail of half-truths and omissions. Daniel never showed up for the hearing. Harper, from what Margaret heard, had already moved back to her sister's place in another state. By the end of the month, the deed was back in her name. But Margaret didn't move in. The house she'd built her life in no longer felt like a home. The walls remembered too much, Sunday dinners that now felt like rehearsals for goodbye, quiet mornings that ended up leading to louder betrayals. She signed the sale papers without a second thought and walked away with more than enough to start over. She found a small brick building on the edge of town, once a boarding house, now sitting empty with peeling paint and a sagging porch. She bought it outright, spent months renovating, repainting, and filling it with second-hand furniture she made feel new. When it was done, she hung a small wooden sign by the door, the Lantern House. It became a place for women over 60 who had lost their homes, some to family disputes, some to rising rents, some to plain bad luck. Each room had a bed with fresh linens, a little reading chair, and a vase for flowers. Margaret cooked Sunday dinners again, but now the table was surrounded by women swapping stories, not by someone waiting to take something from her. One evening, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, she watched the warm light spilling through the windows. Alma was inside mending a quilt. Darlene was humming along to the radio while peeling apples. The air was cool, the kind that carried the promise of fall. Margaret thought about Daniel sometimes. She didn't hate him, but she didn't chase him either. A letter had come once, short, full of regret, but she'd tucked it into the back of her Bible. Not to forget, but to remember without reliving. She'd learned something in all of this. You can lose the roof you built, but you don't have to lose the light you built inside yourself. And sometimes when you carry that light forward, it can help other people find their way too. The porch light clicked on as the sun dipped below the trees. Margaret took a slow breath, letting the quiet wrap around her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't holding on to what was gone. She was living in what she'd made, and that was more than enough. In the end, Margaret's story showed that life doesn't always go the way we hope, and people don't always turn out the way we expect. When things fall apart, it's okay to step back, protect your peace, and start again. Sometimes a new chapter can bring more light than the one you had to leave behind. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I truly appreciate your time and support. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. See you again in the upcoming stories here on Rain Inside.